Chapter 2. Creating Smart Habits and Changing Behavior. The topics that we'll cover in this chapter are: the mind is designed to think as little as possible, habits are created by consistent mapping and repetition, and habit change requires replacing bad habits with good ones. I'm typing this book on my computer using a QWERTY keyboard. The name comes from the arrangement of the first 6 letters on the top row keyboard. I learned to type back in 8th grade. My mom thought it was important for everyone to learn to touch type, and so I dutifully signed up for the class, sat behind a clanking mechanical typewriter, and typed out ASDFJKL over and over, gradually adding other letters to the mix until I could type without having to look at the keys. I never thought much about the layout of the keyboard. That was just how it was arranged. This layout isn't completely arbitrary, though. The modern QWERTY keyboard was developed by Christopher Sholes to help in the development of mechanical typewriters. Most early typewriters had metal bars, with type at the end of each that were smashed against the paper or a ribbon to print the character. If the typist pressed the keys for 2 adjacent bars too quickly, the bars would jam, and the typist would have to stop and clear them before continuing. Sholes' design helped minimize how likely it would be for the bars to jam. Accounts vary about exactly what he was trying to accomplish. Some people suggest he was trying to slow down the rate of typing. Others believe that this arrangement kept people from typing letters housed on adjacent bars. Whatever he was trying to do, he was not trying to maximize typing speed. In the 1870s, when mass-produced typewriters were first starting to appear, the idea of typing quickly was not an issue. It was amazing enough that the common person could create professional-looking type. So while the QWERTY keyboard succeeds at keeping the bars on mechanical typewriters from jamming, it is not so good for promoting fast and effortless typing. Few of the most common letters in English are on the home row of the keyboard, where you place your fingers as you start to type. Only one of the top 6 letters in frequency, the letter A, is on the home row, and that one is typed by the left pinky, which is most people's weakest finger. 4 of the common letters, E, T, O, and I, are on the top row, and another one, the letter N, is on the bottom row. In addition, the arrangement of letters means that many words have to be typed using one hand, and many common letter combinations, like UN, TR, and GR, have to be typed with the same finger. Over the years, people have developed keyboards that require fewer finger movements, that allow more words to be typed from the home row of the keyboard, and that allow typists to alternate back and forth between hands when typing. The most common of these keyboards is the Dvorak keyboard, invented by August Dvorak, an educational psychologist. He really did set out to design a keyboard to maximize typing speed, and his invention worked. In the 1930s, when it was common to hold contests among typists, those using the Dvorak keyboard layout often beat those using the QWERTY layout. Despite the success of this design, few of us type on Dvorak keyboards. Instead, the QWERTY keyboard has remained the standard. The story of keyboards is a classic example of path dependence. A decision made early on for one reason, such as keeping the keys from jamming, influences behavior long after that reason is irrelevant. After all, most of us type on computers that don't have bars that jam. In addition, there is software on most machines that will allow you to remap the keys on your keyboard to the letters they type, so that the keyboard on your computer could be using the Dvorak layout starting today. But you probably won't change your keyboard layout to the more efficient Dvorak system. And you probably shouldn't. There are lots of factors that contribute to path dependence, but I'm interested in just one here: habit. Even though the Dvorak layout might allow me to type faster than I do eventually, I have already developed habits for typing on the QWERTY keyboard. And this is a great habit to have. My handwriting is slow and impossible to read, but I can type fast enough to keep up with what I'm thinking. So being able to type without thinking about the letters is a good thing. I am reminded of the value of this habit when I travel abroad. A few years ago, I was in Germany. The standard keyboard in Germany swaps the location of the Y and Z keys relative to the QWERTY keyboard. On a German keyboard, if you use the familiar movements and try to type the word YOU, it will come out ZOU. As a result, when using a colleague's computer in Germany, I had to stop every few words and retype. I found it difficult and frustrating to use the keyboard because I had to start thinking about typing when I usually can just think about what I want to say. That is the essence of smart habits. The cognitive system is designed as much as possible not to think. There are lots of tasks that you do routinely that you don't want to think about. Habits allow you to turn those tasks into automatic routines so that you can focus your attention on more important things. To get a feel for how widespread habit is in your life, think about a typical day. The alarm goes off. You wake up groggily and stumble to the bathroom. You brush your teeth, shower, make some coffee, and pack your things to leave the house. You drive to work, park, walk through the halls to your desk, fire up your computer, and check your email for the first time during the day. It is barely 9:15 in the morning, and already your life has been dominated by habit. Really? Contrast this routine scene with your first morning in a hotel room on a business trip. The alarm goes off. You probably are not listening to a familiar radio station, and already things seem a little uncomfortable. You get out of bed, and you walk toward the bathroom. But now you have to think about where you put your toothbrush. The shower has unfamiliar controls, and you spend a minute adjusting the temperature to get it right. You may have hung your clothes in the closet, but you feel like you have to double and triple check to make sure you haven't forgotten anything. On your way out of the room, you search for 10 seconds to find the switch to shut the lights off in the room. You kick your foot into the door in a panic, worried that you might have left the card key to the room on a desk. Then you get in a rental car. It is drizzling, and you spend a minute searching for the lever to turn on the wipers, and then adjust them for the light rainfall. You drive slowly from the hotel to the office where you are going to work for the day, checking the street signs carefully to make sure you didn't miss a turn. The signs in front of the office building are hard to read, and it isn't clear where guests are supposed to park, so you ask someone in the lot. When you get into the building, you have no idea where to go, so you check in with the receptionist and wait in the lobby. After a few minutes, someone comes by and leads you to the room where you will have your first meeting. It is barely 9:15 in the morning, and you're mentally exhausted. The difference between these two situations is habit. Your mind is designed so that it thinks as little as possible. Whenever there is a routine that you do in the same way all the time, you develop a habit for it so that you don't have to think about it explicitly anymore. At home, you know where to reach for your toothbrush in the bathroom. You have a particular order for the routine you use to wash up in the morning. You can operate all of the features of your car without giving them a second thought. You take a similar route to work each day, changing it only if there is traffic or an accident. You know all of the twists and turns to get to your office. These are smart habits. You don't want to think about all of the details about how to go about your daily life. When you are forced to think about these details, say when you are traveling to a new place or have moved to a new house, it's stressful and tiring. Life is better when you don't have to think specifically about how to do the most trivial and repetitive tasks. Smart habits enable you to perform desirable behaviors automatically. Automatic behaviors are ones that you do not have to think about consciously to perform. When you drive a car, you don't think explicitly about pressing your foot on the accelerator or engaging the signal in preparation for making a turn. In fact, if I asked you immediately after you made a turn whether you used your turn signal, you might not know for sure. You would probably assume that you had done so because you usually do. but you might not remember for certain. Chances are you have experienced this lack of memory for automatic actions before. Every once in a while you may experience a moment of apprehension that you have forgotten to lock the door to your house. Usually, even when you have this feeling, the door really is locked. Your uncertainty reflects that you have a habitual routine for leaving the house, and locking the door is part of that. Because you do that behavior automatically, you probably have no memory at all of locking the door, particularly if you are thinking about something else on the way out of the house. I have trouble remembering whether I have closed the garage door when I get into the house. I usually press the button for the garage door opener after I park my car, but I'm often thinking about something else at the time. For a long time after moving into my house, I would have to pop my head back into the garage to make sure the garage door was closed. After years of these checks, I finally had a window installed in that door so that I no longer have to open it to see for sure whether I did in fact close the garage. This introduction to habits has two key lessons. First, the key signature of a habit is that it is an action you can perform automatically without having to think about it consciously. Second, most of the time your habits are smart habits. It is unfortunate that we often use the word habit to refer to behaviors that you want to change. Without habits, our lives would be a frustrating daily focus on the most basic tasks of life. Habits are a crucial part of smart thinking. The formula for smart habits. Just as there is a formula for smart thinking, there is a formula for smart habits, which requires only two ingredients. 1. Mapping between an action and an environment consistently. And 2. Performing that action repeatedly. Let's start with the first component of habit formation. Consistent mapping, meaning making a connection, between the environment and the behavior, which requires that there be some unvarying element that reliably signals the action that is to be performed. The environment, for our purposes, consists of both the outside world and your internal mental environment, that is, your goals, feelings, and thoughts. A few examples may help here. Let's go back to the QWERTY keyboard. Because each letter is assigned a particular key, whenever you want to type a letter, T, for example, you press the same button. In addition, when you learn to type, you begin by placing your hands in the same initial position with your index fingers on the F and J keys. For typing, the outside environment consists of the keyboard. The internal mental environment is the goal to type the letter T. The action to be taken in this case is to move the index finger of your left hand up and to the left to press the T key. There are many similar cases of consistent mappings that are set up by the design of the objects in the environment. The accelerator and brake pedals on a car form a consistent mapping. Musical instruments are created to allow consistent mappings. The notes on a piano are always in the same order, and pressing a particular key always creates the same sound. Light switches are designed so that pushing them up turns on the light, and pushing them down turns off the light. Consistent mappings can also involve consistency in conceptual mappings. Basic arithmetic facts create a consistent mapping. When you have the goal to add two numbers and those numbers are 1 and 4, then the answer is always 5. It does not matter whether you are reading the numbers, hearing the numbers, or thinking about them. The sum is always the same. As a result, you can create habits for basic arithmetic facts. The action associated with a consistent mapping can be the activation of a goal that frequently occurs in that situation. When you take your familiar route home from work, there may be a particular intersection where you make a left turn. Driving home on a particular day, when you see that intersection, you automatically engage in behaviors that are associated with turning left, like using the turn signal and looking at the oncoming traffic. However, suppose someone has dropped a bag in the road in the left turn lane at the intersection. Now you can't automatically pull into that lane as you normally do. You still find a way to turn left, though. You just have to think a bit about how to drive around the bag. So the goal to turn left was engaged automatically, but you had to think about how to perform the actions that allowed you to satisfy that goal. There are many situations that may become strongly associated with goals. Habitual smokers tend to smoke a cigarette when they drink coffee. As a result, drinking or smelling coffee, or sometimes even talking about it, can create the need to smoke. Classrooms are associated with sitting and listening to a teacher. When people go into a classroom, they often sit down and face forward, waiting for someone to talk. Recently, I went to back-to-school night at one of my kids' schools. The parents all filed into the classroom, sat at a desk, and looked expectantly toward the front of the room, waiting for the teacher to start talking. Most of these parents haven't been students in school for years, but the habits from their school years are still there. The second component of a habit formation is repetition. Anytime there is a consistent mapping between the environment and an action, and the action is repeated in that environment, a habit will form. Sometimes you structure your life to get that repetition. In that case, you call the repetition practice. A musician practices scales or patterns to develop habits for playing them. A teenager practices driving to develop habits for pressing the accelerator and brake, using the turn signal, and identifying patterns of traffic flow. Children practice their arithmetic tables to develop a habit for producing the correct answer to basic problems. Even without setting up a practice session, repetitions of a behavior in an environment will lead to a habit. You probably don't go out of your way to practice your route home from work. Nonetheless, the repetition of the drive home over many days leads to a habit. Likewise, you don't practice using your email system, but quickly you develop habits for checking your email. You know automatically how to look at your inbox or where to find the button to reply to an email, and how to search for old emails. Why does repetition create habit? Psychologist Gordon Logan has argued that creating a habit involves shifting from effortful thinking to retrieving the correct action directly from memory. When you first learn to drive a car, you may have to think about pressing down the turn signal every time you want to make a turn. Every time that you have the goal to make a turn, and you press the turn signal, however, a memory is stored away that associates the desire to turn with the action of pressing the turn signal. When you get enough of those memories in your system, it becomes faster to retrieve the correct action from memory than to think about it. At that point, the action happens automatically, and a habit is born. How many memories is enough to create a habit? There is no hard and fast number. Perhaps the most important factor that affects the length of time it takes for a behavior to become a habit is the distinctiveness of the memory that is going to drive the behavior. It's easy to remember the details of your one trip to a vacation spot like Disney World, because there is nothing else in your memory to compete with it. It is probably hard for you to remember exactly where you parked your car in the office parking lot, though, because you have parked in the lot hundreds or thousands of times, and every spot in the lot looks more or less like every other spot. All of these memories of places where you have parked your car will compete with each other when you try to call one to mind. Similarly, you are faster to create a habit when the situation in which you will perform the action is unique. When there are many different actions that might have to be performed in similar situations, then the habit will take longer to pick up. Let's contrast two cases. First, imagine you have moved to a new town. There is an intersection on your route from your office to your new house where you have to make a left turn. That intersection has an interesting church on one corner and a restaurant on another corner. These two buildings provide unique landmarks. In this case, it will be relatively easy for you to retrieve a memory of what to do at the intersection on your drive home, and so it will quickly become a habit. After driving toward your new home only a few times, you'll be prepared to make a left at that corner without thinking about it. Now, think about the amount of time you had to spend creating habits for your basic addition facts. Chances are, when you were in second grade or so, it took you hours of practice over several weeks of your life to learn your addition tables. You may have drilled and practiced these facts both in class and at home with flashcards and worksheets. Why is it hard to create a habit for addition? The difficulty arises because the individual arithmetic facts are not that distinctive. The facts are not distinctive because there are many facts that involve each number. The problem 2 plus 4 requires a different answer from 2 plus 7, even though both involve the number 2 and the operation of addition. When you are learning to do addition, the two procedures you have for adding compete with each other. One of those procedures requires some effort. You start with the bigger number and then count up. Adding 2 and 4 means starting with 4 and then counting to 5 and 6. The other procedure is effortless. You try to remember the answer. If you finish counting before you pull up an answer from memory, then the counting procedure wins. If you are confident you have pulled up the right answer from memory before you finish counting, then the habit wins. After you solve the problem by either method, you store another memory that 2 plus 4 equals 6. So each attempt at an addition problem provides memories that will make it faster for you to remember the correct answer in the future. The difficulty with math is there are lots of similar facts. You are learning 2 plus 4 equals 6, but at the same time, you are also encountering problems like 2 plus 7 equals 9, and 2 plus 5 equals 7. Sometimes, when you see 2 plus 4, you will also recall some of those similar problems. When you retrieve these conflicting answers, you are going to be uncertain about which answer is correct. So you will finish carrying out your counting procedure before you have an answer from memory. Once you have a lot of examples of addition problems in your memory, most of what you pull out of memory when you see 2 plus 4 will be other situations in which you also saw 2 plus 4. At that point, you retrieve information from memory faster than you can count, and so you have a habit. Of course, in the case of math, it gets even worse. As soon as you have learned a few addition facts, the teacher adds more. Next, you learn subtraction, and after that, multiplication and division. The same numbers are involved in lots of these facts, and for addition and multiplication, the same two numbers require different answers depending on the operation. In the end, it requires a lot of memories to create a smart habit for math. How can you tell that you have developed a habit? One sign of a habit is that you won't think about the process of doing the behavior anymore. When you do basic addition now, the answer probably pops into your head without any effort. When you drive a car, you don't spend time thinking about how to press the accelerator or tap the brake. When you walk into your bedroom, you neatly flick the light switch in an upward direction without even looking at it. Another way you can tell that you have a habit is that you will have trouble in situations where the environment is changed in ways that no longer support your habit. In 2002, the psychology department at the University of Texas, at which I work, moved to a brand new building. We were very excited about this move. We have a large department, and our faculty and labs had been spread across 5 different buildings on campus. After we moved, though, I noticed that a lot of my colleagues looked a bit more frazzled than usual. Each of us was suffering from a disruption of our smart habits. In my new office, I had to move my garbage can and recycling bin. I would find myself with a crumpled piece of paper in my hand, unsure of where to throw it away. Whatever train of thought I had going would depart long before I figured out where to dispose of the paper. Similar disruptions of thinking happened while searching for light switches, seeking pens and other mundane aspects of daily life. As we all gradually settled into our new space, I think all of the psychology faculty at the University of Texas had a greater appreciation for the benefits of smart habits. Instantly smarter. Get a good night's sleep. You spend about a third of your life asleep. That means that when you reach the age of 45, you have slept for about 15 years. You had better be doing something useful with all of that time. Psychologists have known for a long time that sleep is important for your well-being. People who don't sleep enough have difficulty dealing with stress. They are irritable. They also have trouble sustaining attention. Sleep also influences your ability to learn new things and develop new habits. While you are awake, you have many different experiences. While you are asleep, your brain processes help you integrate those new experiences into your memory in ways that make you more effective in the future. Sleep helps in learning habits. If you are learning to throw darts, you might spend 30 minutes practicing hitting the number 20 on the dartboard. That practice will help you improve your skill. Similarly, practicing the procedures for entering expenses into an accounting system will help you develop skills with a new piece of software. Over the course of a practice session, you will see some improvement. As it turns out, though, you'll improve even more by getting a good night's sleep. Why? There are many different stages of sleep. The stage of sleep that is most familiar to people is rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. In addition, there are 4 stages of non-REM sleep. Each of these stages show different patterns of electrical activity when monitored using an electroencephalograph, or EEG. Research on the relationship between sleep and learning shows that different kinds of learning are associated with different stages of sleep. Some stages of sleep are good for learning habits, whereas other stages are good for learning new facts or relationships among facts. So it's important to make sure you are going through all of the stages of sleep during the night. In addition, there are actually some kinds of learning that benefit most from the sleep you get toward the end of your sleep cycle. If you don't get a good night's sleep, then you will ultimately be less effective at learning and less effective at developing habits. To maximize the effects of your practice, get your sleep. Using your smart habits effectively. From our discussion so far, there are 2 aspects of habits that promote smart thinking. 1. The behaviors you perform habitually do not take up your precious cognitive resources. And 2, you don't have to create habits intentionally. They develop whenever there is a consistent mapping between your mental and physical environment and the behavior you want to carry out. Knowing these principles can help you strive to create habits to help you eliminate distractions. It is particularly important to create good habits in your work environment or whenever you have to think deeply. Keep your workspace organized so that you can always find things you need in the same place. Choose one location for your pens and pencils so that you don't have to search for them. Pick a place for the garbage can and recycling bin and leave them there. The paper clips, stapler, and tape dispensers should not be moved around. When you need to find these objects, you don't want to have to devote mental energy to finding them. Thinking about where you find a pen will crowd out the thoughts you are trying to have about your work. If you create habits for finding basic objects, you can focus your thinking on topics that require your mental energies. In general, you should be on the lookout for distracting elements of your daily routine. I often use sticky notes. I use them for bookmarks when I am reading. I write notes to myself that I hang on my computer monitor. I put them on my computer keyboard in the morning to remind me of things that I have to do before I start checking my email for the day. At some point I noticed that I did not have one place where I kept my stack of sticky notepads. As a result, I would find myself interrupting my reading or thinking to search for a pad of notes. After realizing what I was doing, I found a place under my computer monitor where I could keep a pad. By creating a consistent mapping, I was able to streamline another portion of my day. It is also essential to take the time to understand the basic habits that are important for any area in which you want to develop expertise. When I was about 35, I decided to learn to play the saxophone. I had played the piano as a kid, and I wanted to learn a new musical instrument. In particular, I wanted to learn to play jazz. I spent the first few months just working on getting a noise out of the instrument that sounded vaguely like a saxophone. Early on, I learned a few patterns that could be played over particular chords. But I resisted learning all of my scales, which just seemed like a lot of work. My teacher let me get away with that for a while, but eventually it became clear to me that I would have to break down and practice them. It took a lot of time, and it was not always enjoyable. But it really was important. I simply couldn't play anything interesting if I was struggling to remember what notes could be played in a particular key. And herein lies the fundamental problem in acquiring good habits. As kids, we bristle at the time it takes to learn things like the multiplication tables, or the dates of historical events, or the structure of the periodic table. But as kids, there were teachers and parents and tests to force us to do the things that weren't any fun. When you get older, it is hard to get motivated to put in the practice to create new habits. It would be great to skip all those repetitions and get on to the interesting issues. In situations like this, I'm often reminded of the movie The Matrix. In one scene, the main character, Neo, needs to learn to fight. Since his brain is connected to a powerful computer, with a few keystrokes by the computer operator, a program is downloaded directly to his brain. After a few moments with his eyes closed, Neo looks up at the camera with a smile and says, "I know Kung Fu." Unfortunately, that just doesn't work for the rest of us. There is no shortcut to habit formation. You have to bear down and get those instances into your memory. If you don't acquire the basic habits in any area, you won't become an expert. Smart habits are not merely recommended for smart thinking, they are central to it. When good habits go bad. Most habits are probably good when they are first formed. That is, for many of the habits that you do not create intentionally, there must have been some value to perform that particular behavior. The value is what causes you to repeat the behavior often enough to create the habit. When I was a kid, I used to bite my fingernails. It became a habit that was ultimately very hard to break. However, when I started doing it, it must have felt good or relieved stress, or at least it must have made my nails shorter. I did it often enough that it was hard to catch myself doing it. Eventually, there was a downside to biting my nails. My fingernails looked bad, and so I had to break the habit. Some habits become bad because a behavior that has rewarding elements to it at one time also have negative consequences that may not have been obvious when the habit began. Overeating is one such habit. You may know conceptually that eating too much is a problem, but when you actually overeat, there are few really negative consequences in the moment. Suppose if you eat way too much, you may feel a bit queasy, but the world doesn't end. You don't become violently ill. Most of the time you just enjoy the meal and then feel a bit full. And so you do it again, and again, and again. If you start doing this when you are young, it may not even have that many negative consequences. Eventually, though, if you take in more calories than you burn off, you'll start to gain weight. By the time you really notice that you have gained weight, though, your habit of eating too much is deeply ingrained. Changing habits. Not all habit change is driven by a behavior that has negative consequences. Sometimes the environment changes in some way, and a behavior that worked well in the past is no longer effective. A few years ago, I bought a car that had a smart key. With this car, instead of getting in, inserting the key into the steering column and turning, I had to insert the key into a slot on the dashboard and press a button. The habit I had developed from more than 20 years of driving suddenly did not work at all. I would sit down in the car, key in hand, and find myself reaching to put the key in the steering column. At that point, I had to think about what to do next. It wasn't that the habits I had developed were bad, they just weren't relevant in the new environment. Unfortunately, being in a car and wanting to start it was enough to call the old habitual behavior to mind. There are two important elements to changing habits. First, the presence of the old habit pushes you toward an action. Somehow you must prevent the older behavior from occurring. Second, you have to replace the old habit with a new one, which requires storing new memories that associate the environment with new actions. Habits are driven by your mental and physical environment. Whenever you're in an environment in which you usually carry out the habitual behavior, you're going to be put in a mental state to carry out that behavior again. That mental state consists both of the activation of the goal to perform the behavior as well as the preparation of the actions to perform it. When you have a goal to do something and that goal is currently trying to influence your behavior, then psychologists say that the goal is active. The strength with which that goal is trying to affect your behavior is its level of activation. In most situations, you are not aware of either the activation of the goal to perform an action or the preparation of the actions needed to achieve the goal. If you are driving home from work using your normal route and you reach a key intersection where you have to turn left, the goal to turn left is activated. You prepare and execute the movements to engage the turn signal and make the turn. You can do all of this without having to think about it consciously. Suppose, though, that you need to stop to buy milk on the way home. To get to the grocery store, you have to continue straight at that intersection and go a few more blocks. When you reach that intersection, your habits will activate the goal to turn left. To stop yourself from making that turn, you have to engage conscious effort to stop yourself from carrying out the habitual action. That conscious effort involves the frontal lobes of your brain, a key function of which is to stop or inhibit actions. In the case of driving home from work, you will be successful at buying milk if you inhibit the action of taking a left turn and replace it with the action of driving to the store. Unfortunately, inhibiting habitual actions is effortful. Because it takes effort to stop an action, you will continue with your habitual action if you get distracted. If there is an interesting story on the radio, you may become engrossed in listening to the story. When you reach the intersection where you have to go straight, you will not engage the systems that inhibit your habit because you are devoting those resources to the story on the radio. Later, when you arrive home, you will realize that you have forgotten the milk. Your ability to inhibit habits is also disrupted by stress, by long periods of self-control, and by the continued influence of your environment on your behavior. It is a common observation that people who are on a diet have difficulty sticking to their diet if they are having a bad day. This is a great running joke in the movie Airplane, a classic spoof of disaster movies. In the movie, the pilots of a plane get sick, and a commander on the ground has to figure out a way to help one of the passengers land the plane. Over the course of the movie, this poor commander breaks a diet, starts smoking again, and ultimately re-engages a habit of sniffing glue. For everyone, in the movies and in real life, stress impairs the functioning of the frontal lobes and makes it harder to stop habitual actions. Under other circumstances, you may find that you exhaust your capacity to control an habitual behavior if you have to expend mental and/or physical energy to prevent yourself from acting badly. Eventually, you sap the strength to continue regulating yourself in what psychologist and author of Willpower, The Rediscovery of Human's Greatest Strength, Roy Baumeister and his research collaborators refer to as ego depletion. Consider, for example, the manager who may be trying to quit smoking. After a couple of weeks of success, he has a day in which an employee has angered him through carelessness at his job. Although they interact regularly throughout the day, the manager works hard to avoid creating a scene by reprimanding him publicly. At the end of the day, the manager finds himself pulling into the local convenience store to buy a pack of cigarettes because he just doesn't have the capacity to fight the desire to smoke that day. In essence, the worst way to try to stop a habit is through what we usually call willpower. You can stop yourself from a bad habit sometimes, but you can't rely on willpower as the only way to break a habit. Finally, the environment that suggests the habitual behavior can activate the goal associated with that action. As a result, even if you successfully inhibit the action, the goal will still be available to affect your behavior. If you are trying to lose weight, you may try to eat less food. Perhaps you have a habit to have a bowl of potato chips in the evening. When the evening comes, the time of day, and your familiar evening activities activate the goal of eating chips. Although you may stop yourself from eating the chips on one occasion, the goal to eat a snack is still active. At that point, you may start feeling cravings to eat. Cravings happen when you have an active goal that has been blocked. Cravings are your mind's way of reminding you that there is something you have left to do. To stop an old behavior, then, you must not only prevent the habitual behavior from being performed, but also deal with the goal that is activated by the situation. Effective ways to break a habit. You can help block habitual actions by changing the environment in ways that decrease the chances that the habitual behavior will be recalled. If you have a favorite restaurant where you overeat, then one way to keep yourself from overeating is to stop going to that restaurant. If the restaurant triggers the behavior, then avoiding the restaurant will make it less likely that this behavior will be retrieved from memory. Of course, there will be times that you cannot change your environment. If you are trying to develop new eating habits, and you often overeat in your own kitchen, then it is unreasonable to expect that you will stay out of the kitchen. In a situation like this, you want to disrupt your habits by affecting the consistent mapping of the environment to behavior, so that your behavior can no longer be carried out automatically. One way to make an action difficult to perform automatically is to remove things from your environment that would help you to carry out a behavior without thinking. If you often eat potato chips while watching television, stop buying potato chips. If they are not in the house, you will not be able to eat them mindlessly. A second way to block habitual actions is to disrupt the specific actions that make up the habit. Earlier in this chapter, I described the difficulty of waking up in an unfamiliar hotel room. This disruption, which is so frustrating when you are traveling, can be put to your advantage when trying to change habits. Move your dishes around the kitchen. Put the pots and pans in a different location. Rearrange the food in your refrigerator. Start shopping at a new supermarket so that you will have to really think about all of your purchases. Now you will have to think about all of the behaviors in your kitchen that used to be habitual. Because you are in a position to think about those behaviors, you are engaging the systems in the frontal lobes of your brain that can also be used to stop you from carrying out your habit. The point of these recommendations is to put you in the best possible position to create a new habit. Avoiding situations that trigger a habit will make it less likely that you will perform the habit you want to change. When you disrupt your environment, you create a situation that is like my new car with the smart key. The habits you have developed are no longer applicable. You are now forced to be mindful about your behavior. Replacing old habits with new. So far, so good. You have given yourself the best possible chance to avoid performing the mindless behaviors that sustain your bad habit. Now, you need to reprogram yourself with a new habit to replace the old one. Perhaps the most important insight about habits is that they are created by storing lots of instances of a behavior in memory. This is where it would be nice if you could just find those memories and remove them, the way you might delete an unwanted document from a computer. Unfortunately, your mind doesn't work like that. You can't just erase things from memory at will. In fact, the best way to disrupt a memory is to interfere with it. In the case of habits, that means creating new memories that are similar to the old ones. You have to associate new habits with each environment in which you use to perform the habitual behavior. This point is an important one. Many of the hardest habits to break are ones in which you are trying to replace something, a behavior, with nothing, the absence of the behavior. People who want to quit smoking typically think of this change as stopping an undesired behavior, smoking, and replacing it with nothing, not smoking. People trying to eliminate between-meal snacking take one behavior, eating, and replace it with nothing, not eating. You cannot replace something with nothing. There will be times when the habitual behavior is called to mind, and the goal to perform that behavior will become active. If you don't create new memories that interfere with the habit, then the old memories will continue to be retrieved. Despite your best intentions, you'll be forced to use willpower to fight off the urge to perform the behavior you are trying to change. Replace something with something else. Let's return to the example of trying to stop eating snacks while watching television. One possibility for trying to change this behavior would be to take up a hobby that you can do with your hands while you watch TV. You could learn a craft like crocheting, or set up a jigsaw puzzle on the coffee table near the television. These activities can often be done while you watch TV because neither activity requires intense concentration. As this new behavior becomes a habit, it will be called to mind in the situations that used to trigger the old behavior. There are two general benefits to replacing something with something else. First, you begin to associate a new behavior with the environment that used to call the habit to mind in the past. So the new behavior makes the environment less strongly associated with the habit that you're trying to replace. Second, as the new behavior becomes a habit, it will have its own goal associated with it. This new goal competes with the old goal and helps dampen the cravings that go along with stopping the old behavior. That is, adding a new habit gives your motivational system something to do so that it doesn't get stuck on the behavior that you're trying to change. To summarize, a key element of habit change is that you must replace old habits with new behaviors. The new behavior changes the relationship between the environment and the old habit by associating new behaviors with an environment that was associated with an old habit. The new habit also adds a new goal that will be called to mind to compete with the goal that was related to the old habit. Installing a new habit. Make no mistake, though, habit change is difficult. There are two things that often stand in the way of successful behavior change. The first is a lack of real commitment to changing the habit. The second is difficulty identifying all of the triggers for the old behavior. Unfortunately, the punchline to the old joke holds true. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to want to change. Many academic studies suggest that you will not be successful at creating lasting habit change unless you really commit to the process. Just as you are unlikely to be successful at coercing someone else to change a behavior unless that person makes a commitment to change, you will not make changes in yourself without a similar commitment. Even after committing to habit change, it is important to identify elements of your life that support your current habits. Without knowing what triggers the behavior you want to change, you will not succeed despite your best intentions. After all, you cannot change your environment or engage your willpower effectively if you are not aware of the circumstances that drive your unwanted behaviors. To start on the road to habit change, then, you need to become mindful of the things you do mindlessly. To this end, I recommend that you start your process of habit change with a habit diary. Carry a small notebook around with you. Whenever you notice that you are about to perform that habitual behavior, or that you have just done it, make a note of the date, the time of day, your mood, where you were, and what you were thinking about. While keeping the habit diary, don't spend a lot of time analyzing what you were doing. Just note your impressions of the situation. At the end of each week, go back over the diary and start looking for patterns. Is there a particular time of day when you are performing the behavior? Are there particular settings in which it happens most? Are there particular people who seem to trigger the behavior? Are there people in your life who help keep you away from your bad habits? Are you most likely to engage in your habit when you are happy, or sad, or anxious? The habit diary gives you a chance to learn about yourself, and gradually you will come to a greater understanding of the factors that triggered the habit. At the beginning, you may wish to avoid those situations in which you perform the undesired behavior as you change your behavior to create smart habits. In other trigger situations, you may want to introduce a new behavior that will gradually replace an undesired behavior. In either case, being mindful will help you engage some willpower to help get you through the initial phases. Even after you start the process of habit change, you should continue to keep the habit diary for a while. There are a few reasons to keep going. First, keeping a diary helps you become more aware of when you are performing the behavior you are trying to change. Awareness of the behavior helps prevent you from continuing to perform it mindlessly. Second, as you progress with habit change, you may discover situations in which you are still performing the behavior. Third, you may also discover situations in which you wanted to perform the old behavior, but found ways to resist it successfully. Fourth, over time you should begin to notice that you are performing the undesired behavior less often, which will give you some positive feedback that you are successfully changing your behavior. Most of what we have talked about so far in this chapter focuses on physical habits. That is, the habits involve behaviors that you perform to act on the world. Eating, smoking, driving, and reaching for the sticky notes under your monitor are all physical habits. Smart thinking will ultimately require you to develop good mental habits as well as good physical habits. A mental habit is one that you develop to help with your thinking processes. These mental processes may also involve physical objects, like lists, but you have constructed these objects to assist with your ability to think. Consider the organizational strategies that you may have for getting things done. Perhaps you keep a written to-do list, or you carry a smartphone that keeps track of your schedule. You have probably developed habits associated with these devices. You may keep a to-do list on your desk in a particular place. You may check it at regular times during the day. You may routinely delete entries as soon as you complete them and add new ones as soon as they are assigned. These behaviors also become habits. By keeping your to-do list in the same place all the time, you ensure a consistent mapping between the environment and a behavior. In the chapters that follow, I'll talk about how to ensure that you have high-quality knowledge and that you can use that knowledge effectively. Ultimately, you want to have smart habits that allow you to implement the formula for smart thinking as a part of your daily routine. The takeaway. The mind is constantly looking to create habits. The main benefit of a habit is to take a process that required attention to start with and turn it into something that can be retrieved effortlessly from memory. Because your mind is a habit-creating machine, anytime there is a consistent and repeating mapping between your physical and mental world and some behavior, you have the conditions to form habits. It is crucial to remember that most of your habits are good. They allow you to perform actions without having to think about them. As a result, you can focus your mental effort on issues of interest to you rather than on the routine aspects of your life. To engage smart thinking, you want to ensure you have consistent mappings between your environment and desirable behaviors that will support smart habits. Make sure that you are not spending valuable time and mental energy on tasks that could and should become automatic. While habits, good or bad, can be created unconsciously, there are 3 cases in which acquiring good habits requires some effort. First, you may have to organize your environment to create consistent mappings. Second, you may need to develop a practice schedule to provide enough repetitions of the behavior to generate a habit. Third, when you need to change an existing habit, you will have to make a conscious effort to do so. There are 2 critical components of habit change. The first is to find ways to stop performing the old behavior. The mental processes that stop old behaviors are effortful and can be interfered with easily. Thus, it is important to change the environment that triggers a bad habit in the first place, and reduce or eliminate the stress and strenuous continual self-regulation that interfere with your ability to change. The second crucial part of habit change is to replace the bad habit with a good one. Because habits are actions that are retrieved from memory, you cannot be successful with habit change if you try to replace something with nothing. Sheer willpower alone is not effective. Instead, replace one habit with another. The new habit interferes with the old one and gradually allows it to replace the undesired behavior. Finally, because you carry out habits automatically, you need to become mindful of mindless behaviors to support habit change. It helps to create a habit diary to identify what triggers your habits, so you can change elements of your environment to minimize the number of situations in which the habit will be engaged, and so you can prepare to use your willpower when a situation that promotes the bad habit cannot be avoided.